down BKR Sports. It is time to talk about the Canberra Raiders heading into 2024. And you gently forgive me a little bit. Obviously, my Detroit Lions did lose in the NFC Championship today, so I'm trying my best to be as hype as possible. But with that being said, I am, that one did definitely crush me for sure, but still very proud of the season. I know it's got nothing to do with the Canberra Raiders here, but with that being said, it is a tough day. It is a tough day for me, but that's life, baby. That's sport, and that's exactly, I guess, what we're going to be talking about today with the Canberra Raiders. Because Raiders fans, they know too well that that is life and that is sport, and, they have gone very underrated, really. I think because of the bottom of the squeals, the Parramatta Eels run of about 38 years, people forget that the Raiders are about 29 odd years themselves without a premiership, and they obviously got close in 2019. We will not talk too heavily about that grand final there, but the fact of the matter is that they have been in a real kind of, besides 2019, a stagnant kind of plateau, of a club for quite some time, and it must get really, really frustrating that they can't really take that next step up, and also they're not really dropping off a significant amount. They're just kind of there, and I'll actually kind of really reinforce this by saying last year, obviously the Raiders, they finished in 8th position with a minus 137 points differential. They gave up 623 points last season, which was, close enough to the Dragons. It was close enough to the Dragons at 673, so only 50 different points there, which is just mad considering they're a top 8 team. The only teams that were worse than them were the Dolphins, the Titans, the Bulldogs, the Dragons, and the Tigers in regards to that defensive kind of standing point. However, obviously they did still make the 8 because they won enough games. They didn't win a single 13-plus game last year. So, real nail-biting stuff, real grindy stuff, which is exactly what Canberra are known for. But, obviously last year happened. They came 8th. The year before that happened, in 2022, they came 8th. Yes, and nothing changed at all. Much better defensive, actually, to be fair, 461 points given up in 2022 to 623 in 2023, right? So, a massive change there in the defensive capabilities. So, they finished in 8th. You go back to 2021, they finished in 10th. So, they've only, in the last 3 years, they have only switched around 3 spots. And, fun fact for you, if the Raiders in 2021 had won their final game of the season, they would have finished in 8th, right? So, yeah, really, really kind of frustrating last couple of years for them. Then you go back, and obviously they finished in 5th there in 2020, 2019. They finished in 4th when they made the grand final. And you can kind of see that when they were there, they still weren't. It's actually a little bit of a surprise they made the grand final considering, and arguably could have won that grand final is what I'll say. I won't say should have. Arguably could have won that grand final. So, but they're in 4th, right, with Rabbitohs, Roosters, and Storm finishing above them that year. So it's an interesting prospect here with the Raiders where those days are clearly gone. But with that being said, they're still a top 8 team and they are still competitive. And I guess that's what, I correlate with the Knights in a way where the Knights are the working class, tough workers, hard grinders, as we said in the video the other day. The Raiders are really pure grinders. They just simply grind through games. And that's why they win games 1-12, right? And today I'm going to be talking about whether I feel like people are underestimating them going into 2024 based off of this. Because, again, most people predicted them quite low last year. And, rightfully so. They found a way to get the wins. But with that being said, this or that changes in the game and they could have easily finished well and truly lower. One less win and they would have finished 11th place with the Rabbitohs making the 8, Eels coming 9th, and the Cowboys coming 10th. And, 2 less wins and they're dropping, well down. So, it was a really close competition last year and the Raiders got by. And again, they were actually kind of top 4 for a lot of the season and then fell out to 8th place, but it was not from them winning games convincingly. And that is a major, major worry and a concern coming into 2024 because they've actually lost attack. And I will say this as well. The Raiders had better attack last year than the Roosters. They had 486 points scored compared to 472 for the Roosters. But here's the kicker. The other teams in the top 8, 619, 626, 572, 627, 639, and 645. So, the Raiders and the Roosters, obviously, attacking-wise, nowhere close to being with those other teams. And then defensively, it was realistically only the Raiders that were even... Well, the Raiders were the only team that had conceded more than 500 points in the 8 last year. So, Yeah, really, really interesting to kind of see how the Raiders go about putting their lineup together. Considering they've lost Jack Whiten, they are changing their team around a little bit, and we are maybe seeing a different styled Raiders than we have seen in recent years. But again, I would say on a predicted level, on what we can see from on paper and from what we can see going into the year, they don't exactly seem to have an X factor electric backline, and their halves are changed now. And their hooker role is it kind of Starling, or is it Wolford, or what are they doing there? They don't even really know their guaranteed fullback just yet. So where does the attack come from to improve that 486 they had last year? I don't know, but let's go into the predicted lineup here to see for the 2024 season. So as the fullback, this is the predicted round 1 team from NRL.com. This is all we can go off right now, guys. Obviously, preseason starting in a couple of weeks. But their predicted lineup, they've got Chevy Stewart as the fullback. I would have expected it to be Xavier Savage, but maybe Chevy Stewart. Regardless, it's not a guarantee. There's no real kind of bolster guarantee fullback there for us to really go a great deal on. But if you're going via Chevy Stewart, it's an unknown, a complete unknown. You go on the wings, Nick Cottridge and Jordan Rapana, both guys very, very experienced. But Jordan Rapana is not the X-Factor guy that he once was. He is obviously much older now. And Nick Cottridge hasn't been the same for quite a few years now when he was originally at Canberra before he went to the Doggies and then back to Canberra. So the wing pairing is interesting. And then you've got your centres there that they're predicting Matty Tomoko and Ethan Strange. Surprised that Sebastian Kris isn't featuring anywhere around here unless he's potentially suspended, which I could be wrong. But I would assume that Sebastian Kris will definitely be in the team somewhere. And that would probably be the centre. But the point of the matter is that this first 5, there is so many question marks in regards to their attack and even in their defence that really does concern a lot of people going into this year. And Matty Tomoko, I love this guy. I think he's a really strong player. I do think he's a great player to watch. But I also don't think that he is on that next level just yet and hasn't really achieved that. I think he does a solid job, but there's just not that next step that's been taken just yet, which, I've actually been really high on him for quite some time now. Really quality player, really solid player, needs to see that next step this year. But a centre is only as good as their halves. And their halves, they've obviously lost Jackie Whiten, who's gone to the Rabbitohs. And I don't think that Jack Whiten was necessarily the best 5'8" in the game. I don't really necessarily think that he was doing a great, phenomenal job in the 5'8" department for the Raiders there at all. And I do think that it was probably time for them to move on. But with that being said, they've got the predicted Akayo Weeks as the 5'8". There might be Ethan Strange as the 5'8", not sure. And then Jamal Fogarty, who is the 7, who will do his job. Right, he will do his job. And this is, as a Titans fan, I said this to you guys when he left the Titans. He's not going to win you guys a comp. It's just not going to happen. Jamal Fogarty will not win the comp with the Raiders. But he will absolutely do the job for the time being. And you're not going to see him put too much of a step wrong and too much of a foot wrong that is going to make you dislike the guy. But when it comes to actually taking that electric next step up to really compete with the big time teams, you're not going to see that kind of production out of Jamal Fogarty. It's just going to be a pretty basic direction, but it do the job. And, you've got KO Weeks there potentially coming into that 5'8" department, who we don't really know a great deal of. Obviously came from Manly. I do think that he could have a breakout year this year for sure. And I do think that his kind of game style could benefit Jamal Fogarty in a lot of ways, especially with the kind of elusiveness that he can provide. But it's a massive unknown. Again, every single part of this 1 through 7 so far do have massive unknowns and massive question marks coming into the year. You go into the 4-pack though. You've got Josh Papali'i and Joseph Tarpany, with the 9 being Zach Wolford / Tom Starling. The Raiders hookers have been confusing for a while now. People have wanted to see more Tommy Starling for ages. I believe in, Ricky Stewart understanding how to implement his players. I trust that Ricky Stewart actually understands more than everybody else. He is obviously with these guys all the damn well time, every single day, right? So I trust that Ricky knows that that's probably the best way to utilize these 2 guys here at the Raiders. Do I agree with it? From an outsider's perspective, not necessarily. But again, Ricky sees it a lot more than myself and of others, right? And that those front rowers there of Josh Papali'i and Joseph Tarpany, you could see a little bit of regression out of Papali'i this year. Obviously, he's getting on in age. He's been one of the best front rowers for a very, very long time. But age does come. That age does obviously start to impact. Joseph Tarpany, though, I'm expecting a massive, massive year out of him. I put him in one of my first players in Supercoach this year. I'm really excited to see what Joey Tarps can do for the Raiders. And usually you see when teams are struggling, especially in the attacking department, you're going to see those forwards really, really shine. And Joseph Tarpany is the guy that could really, really shine with a team that is predicted to really struggle with their attacking department. The back rowers, Hudson Young and Elliot Whitehead. Elliot Whitehead, the age will start to get to him. However, has been so good for so long as well. Very, very experienced, real grindy. He's the definition of what a Raider is, realistically. Just grind, tough, big bopper. He'll do the job there for them. Don't think he's going to be at an elite level that he has been in the past. But him and Hudson Young will do well. But Hudson Young needs to take another improvement year, right? Last year, he made Origin. I predicted him to make New South Wales. But it did kind of get a little bit to him, in my personal opinion. It wasn't Hudson Young's best year by any means. Again, did make his debut. But if you watch his debut and you watch him in the Raiders last year, I didn't see what I was expecting to see from him. But I know that he does have the talent there. Just maybe, not focus too much on talking shit in Origin and try and get back into the game, you know what I'm saying? And really prove your game. Because, again, fantastic player when he's on. And then the 13. It's predicting here Morgan Smithies. Corey Horsburgh must be suspended or injured because Horse will definitely be getting that 13 role there. But, Horsburgh is a very, very tough player, very, very quality player there in that 13. So really looking forward to another big year out of him. Was it a one-off? Not too sure. But he's a very, very tough player that really proved me and a lot of people wrong, actually. I didn't think he was that great going into last year, but then he really proved himself and really took a step up, and it was absolutely brilliant to watch, man. So, I expect him to get the 13, but obviously they've got Morgan Smithies here, so there must be something that's going on there. Unknown if it isn't, Horsburgh, but I think it will be, right? The bench, Tommy Starling, Emre Gula, Pasami Saulo, and Zach Hosking, who they brought across from the Panthers. It's an interesting bench. It's nothing that lights the world on fire, is what I would say. It's nothing that I would go out of my way to say, yeah, that's a big time bench. I definitely think there's a lot of other teams, a majority of other teams that probably do have a lot more quality on that bench overall as a collective. But again, it's kind of just to do the job bench, right? And this is where I say, are people underestimating the Raiders this year? Because the Raiders always seem to be in the hunt in the games, right? They always seem to be there. And I still think they could probably win enough games to avoid where people predict them in the spoon. I do think that majority of teams actually right now, it's hard to actually see who will get that spoon because I don't necessarily believe, I think the Dragons are in a very similar point where they kind of just stick in games and know how to win here and there to avoid that spoon. But the Raiders specifically, I could still see them kind of finishing below 10th, like 10th area. I don't think they're a top 8 team by any means. But with that being said, there's not a great deal of adjustment. It's not a significant amount of adjustment besides that Jack Whiten loss, which granted is a big loss, but I just don't think that he was providing a great deal for them and it was time for him to go. So this is a bit of a fresh start here for the Raiders. And I do think that the Raiders forward pack is going to get them into the attack in 20, into the attack in 10, more often than not. And Raiders fans, you'll hate me comparing you to this, but I do compare this Raiders team quite significantly to the Tigers. I do. And that is a little bit of a concern. But I do consider them very similar to the Tigers in the sense that the 8 through 13 for the Tigers is actually quite good. The 8 through 13 for the Tigers is very, very solid, right? But their 1 through 7 is struggle street central. It's absolutely struggle street central. So going into last year, I said, listen, that forward pack of Isaiah Papali'i, they had Utukamanu, who made his Origin debut, Abisai Koroisau, and that number 9. Alex 12, solid player, solid enough player. They had Johnny Bateman, who you Raiders fans know all about. They've got all these really, really top-tier forwards, but they hadn't got any players in that backline, that 1 through 7, that was actually able to score tries. They had Luke Brooks, and then they I can't even think of who their 7 was at this point, to be completely... Oh, no, Luke Brooks was their 7, and then... I can't even remember the halves part. It's been that poor. That 1 through 5 for the Tigers, besides Dream Buller, was really, really struggling, and you could see that from the outset. So, I do say that the 8 through 13 for the Raiders is similar to the Tigers, and I will say the 1 through 7 for the Raiders is similar-ish to the Tigers, but more quality in this Raiders backline than there was and is in that Tigers backline. So that's why I actually start to believe that Tigers may actually get the spoon again, and I think they're on the right direction. But that's another year that they'll start to compete again. But I just see a lot of similarities. I see a lot of similarities. So there is every chance in the world that this Raiders team could finish in that bottom 4, and there is every chance in this world the Raiders could get the spoon. I just don't think a forward pack with the names of Hudson Young, Joseph Tarpany, Josh Papali'i, Elliot Whitehead, Corey Horsburgh and whatnot, I don't believe that that's a possibility to come dead smack last. But that 1 through 7, there is that possibility because the forwards are going to get into that attack in 20, but who's going to score the tries? Who is going to score the tries? Jordan Rapana is not what he used to be. Nick Kotrich, fine. Matty Tomoko, fine. Right? On the upper end, but fine. Not necessarily a massive try scorer, though, is what I'd say. Then you go to the centre of Ethan Strange or Sebastian Chris or whatnot. Nothing lighting the world on fire. And then the fullback, Xavier Savage or Chevy Stewart. People have been high on Xavier Savage for a long time, but it just hasn't really come yet, and we don't really know much about Chevy Stewart. So, a lot of chance for regression in regards to the older players in the forward pack. If you have regression in that forward pack and you see that age coming, it'll be a tough year. It'll be a real tough year where you'll probably finish in that bottom 4, and you'll probably still win enough games to avoid that spoon, but you'll be in the bottom 4. If those forwards kick on and keep going, and this is their last year of real sheer quality before the age starts to get to them, then I could still see probably maybe around a 10th and competing for that 8 because they'll be able to grind out games more often than not. But I can't see this team making the 8. I don't think that there is enough talent in this team comparatively to other teams that the Raiders are going to make the 8 this year. Right? So I think that overall, it is a confusing situation because you do want to say, hey, listen, this team actually does still kind of prove everybody wrong every single year. But then there is that side where it's like, well, they do, but that was also a bit of a different team. This team has changed slightly and in pretty key positions, and there is a lot of confusing things about other positions as well. So, overall, a lot of question marks. A lot of question marks. Very interested to see how the Raiders do go this year. It's a tough time to be a Raiders fan, that's for sure. There's a lot of other teams that it's tough to support as well, but the Raiders, they have gone through a very long-standing point now without winning a premiership. Do have that past, but a lot of their fans nowadays probably didn't get to watch that back then when they last won in 95 or 94. I think it was 95, right? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. But that's all I need to say here about the Raiders today. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts. Obviously, this is just my opinion, right? So jump in the comment section. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you think I'm right. Let me know. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you're new around here. And I will see you guys next time. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. See you.